Okay, y'all ready to get started? This project is a collage of the blue whale of Catoosa. You can follow along with me or do your own thing. You know what I realized after I created this little project for you was that if you haven't seen the blue whale of Catoosa on Route 66, then you might not know what all these elements are. So here you go. I labeled them for you. Okay, so your design is printed on mixed media paper. It's not quite watercolor paper, but it interacts with water a lot better than cardstock does. So I would recommend that you use mixed media paper for the background, which we'll get to in just a minute. You can pick up mixed media paper at any craft store and you can order it online. I would suggest that you get a 6x9 size so that it will allow you to create a 5x7 background for your mat and then fit that into an 8x10 frame. Oh my word, too many words. I'm using a Crayola set of markers, one of the larger sets. You could use Rose Art or anything that's water-based for this project. So notice that I turn my paper very often when I'm using the markers. That's just so that the tip of the marker, which makes the cleanest line, is closest to the outline of the design. And so if I don't have even pressure, my ragged edge will be towards the inside, which, that's going to get blended in with water in a minute anyways. So first I go around the edge of the whale inside the lines with the blue, and next I go to the lips. And for the lips, I'm using a little bit of red and a little bit of magenta. And now I've got a light purple for the inside of the mouth. And I'm not worried about filling the space in because the water's going to do that work for me in just a minute. Also, I'm going to use the purple on the little doorway and a little bit on the slide. And I'm looking at the whale and I think he needs a little more variety. So now for another blue, you could just do this right after you do the first outline. I just kind of figure it out as I go. But I think a little lighter color on the inside of the outline will help add a little dimension and some interest. So notice the little color swatches up on the left side of my paper. That's because the Crayola markers are notorious for never actually matching the color of the lid to the color of the ink. Also, I let my art kids use these markers and they are notorious for almost never putting the lids back on the right markers without switching colors. So anyway, okay, a little more purple outline to the eyeball and the insides of the portholes and some magenta and red on the Route 66 sign. And I'm going to use some dark blue on the waves. I'm not quite sure that I will actually use the waves in my design, but perhaps. And some red and magenta on the ball cap with a little bit of light purple on the bill. And also to kind of show some, maybe add a little dimension to the Route 66 sign. And I'm using dark blue for the numbers, and that's all the coloring that we need to do on the whale. Now it's time to move to the painting part. So I'm using a medium-sized brush to flood the center of the whale with clean water, and then I just kind of pull the color into the water and let the water do the work. This is where the mixed media paper comes in really handy. It's sturdy enough to take the water, and it does buckle some, but you can flatten it out, and it lets the colors bloom together really nicely without getting fuzzy or kind of pilling like what happens to cardstock when it gets wet. So I used a small brush for tight areas. You can use a small brush for the whole thing if you want to. I just had two handy, so. And you can use the brush to move the water around a bit. If it looks like you have too much white space, then I would wait until the paper dries and then go back in with a little bit more magic marker and then touch it up with a wet paintbrush again. I've not had success adding marker to wet paper, but you might, and you don't know if you don't try, right? I got a little carried away with the water. It's puddling too much and just adding to my drawing time at this point. So I blot up the extra water with a paper towel and pick up a little blue with the brush and touch it to the inside of the slide. You can see that I smudged some of the turquoise blue into what was supposed to be my nice pretty white outline. So I tried a watercolor paper trick where you add water to the pigment that you want to remove and then blot it up. But it didn't work, but I'm okay with that. Okay, this is my background paper. It's also mixed media paper and it's 6 by 9 inches. I have a 5 by 7 mat for an 8 by 10 frame. So I lay it over my 6 by 9 paper and lightly mark the corners and sides in pencil. I want to make sure that I extend my color past those marks because I don't want to have any blank space in between the design and the edge of the mat. Okay, I used 2 different greens to suggest trees in the background and grass in the foreground, and I used a light pink and yellow in the sky. Note to self, the yellow doesn't bloom as well as the other colors. I used dark blue for the water's edge and a lighter blue for the pond and the sky. And now just add water. So I make sure my brush is clean before I go into the pink and yellow. You can see the puddles now, so I use the paper towel and blot some more and set that aside to dry. Okay, now we've got all the design elements cut out and the whale in the paper are dry. I actually ironed both of them to kind of flatten them out a little bit. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I'm pointing out my little reference marks that I made for the 5 by 7 mat. Now it's time to glue the dried elements onto the background. So I start with the whale, and I'm not too concerned about exact placement, but you could use a ruler and be more precise if that's your gig. And once I place the eyeball on the whale, I decide there's a little bit too much of that white border, so I trim a little off right here. Same thing with the ball cap. My friend Ellen told me about these Tim Holtz scissors, and they are a game changer when it comes to fussy cutting. I think I got them at Hobby Lobby. So I'm trimming a little bit off the top of the slide where it's going to intersect with the doorway. The ladder goes in next. And finally, the Route 66 road sign. Final check now with the mat board, and I realized I forgot my other little puddle mark. So I tried out in a couple of places, but you know what? I don't think it adds to the piece, so I'm not even going to end up using it. After I see that white mat around the whole design, I think the black outline on the road sign is a little too strong. So I use a white gel pen to soften it up a bit with some polka dots. And there you have it. You created something beautiful that didn't exist yesterday. Yay, you.